In this video, we're going to look at some descriptive statistics. You may want to use descriptive statistics when you've collected some numerical data, some interval or ratio data, and you need to either have an idea of what the average is or the distribution or the standard deviation. You want to know how this data is distributed. And so I've got a couple data sets here. I've got IQs and income. So we can see how those two data sets are distributed amongst the population, because when you summarize survey results or you summarize your data, we often give averages. The average response was this, or the average respondent had this particular profile. But averages and other descriptive statistics have their place. We don't always want to fall back on them, but there's sometimes when it makes sense. And so we're going to look at using those descriptive statistics to take a look at these data in more detail. So first thing I want to do, and during this one I will note that we're going to use the data analysis tool pack, the data analysis tab under data. But first, before you do any descriptive statistics, because the tendency is to run your descriptive statistics and report on the mean, the average. What is the average? The average might not be useful. So first thing you want to do is create a histogram. So I'm going to start with IQ. So if I just select my data set for IQ, and I'm going to scroll back up to the top of my pane, and I'm going to look at Insert, go to my Charts tab, and look for Histogram. A histogram is a visual breakdown of your data into bins or buckets. And so it sort of displays categories. So it'll just be a segment of your data. It'll divide it up into neat little bins and display each one of those. So it'll break it down into a nice distribution, little buckets of data to show how many data points fall into each bucket. And this distribution looks pretty normal. So we can see that most of the responses happen to be in the middle range here. And then there's a few extremes. So this is almost your typical normal distribution that you'd see. So if we were going to use IQ, what we'd expect to see is our mean, our average, be pretty close to their mode in the median. And so we want to know that, just because when you are comparing means, you're doing some difference of means tests, then you can do a lot more knowing that your data is normally distributed. We'll do the same thing for income. So if I Control Shift down, select my data set for income, let's see how incomes are distributed in the population here in our data set. So again, to insert recommended charts, look for my histogram, and I can see that the data is not normally distributed. So two very different looking charts. So in this case, for IQ, very normally distributed. Not so for income. We've got a skew in the data. So it is very skewed to the left side, and it heads down and almost bells up a little bit, but really it's more or less skewed to the left. And so that skew means that we probably don't want to listen to our mean, because the mean isn't going to tell us much. So that's the first thing. Anytime before you do, good rule of thumb, before you do any descriptive stats, run the histogram first. And there are some little tricks I won't get into with running histograms. You can set the sizes of bins and overflow bins, and so you can make it look, you can tailor how it looks, but really the default is okay. If we use Excel to give us a histogram, it works just fine, because we can see right away these two data sets not distributed the same way. So how do I do my descriptive statistics? Well, I'll go to my Data tab and click on Data Analysis. And it's going to bring up my selection window, and all of the different statistical tests that are available are displayed here. And I want descriptive stats. What I'll need to do here is enter my input range and my output range. The input range is the data that's going in, and the output range, where do I want to put it? So my output range is actually going to be within the same worksheet. So I'll click on output range, and I'll know that I want that to be right here. I'm just going to leave it right next to my data. So for my input range, I'm going to click on the active window and then select my data. So here I've got 191 rows of data. What do you want? I want summary statistics. It's going to give me the 95% confidence interval. If you've taken your stats before, then you'll remember what that is. We don't really need to know that for the purposes of data visualization. And I'll click on OK. And we've got non-numeric data. So what that's telling me is can't do the analysis because there is titles. There are letters instead of numbers. No problem. I can select this one. Labels in the first row. So I'm telling Excel to ignore those. And I click OK, and it gives me my descriptive statistics. Now I chose to do 2 columns at once, 2 columns of data, so it's giving me 2 reports. You can do one at a time. You can do several, but this way we can get to look at them side by side and visually see if there's anything interesting in the data. So I'm just going to resize these for a second. So right away, the mean. For IQ that was normally distributed, we can see the mean 98. The mean IQ is just below 100. The median 99. Mode 97. That's exactly what we would expect. So that's one of the first things we want to look for in our descriptive stats. Your mean, your median, and your mode. The other thing we want to look at is the skewness. Our skewness tells us which direction the data is leaning. And so you've got a positive number. You would see a positive integer means it's an extreme positive skew. You see a big negative number, there's a big negative skew. And if the number's close to 0, then it's pretty much normal. And so here we can see we're not too far from 0, and that lets us know that we've got data that is pretty normally distributed. So there's not much skew in the data one way or the other. There's just a slight skew. Conversely, we bring it over to the income side, and we can see that the mean, 82, the median and the mode, 50 and 44. So the median, a lot different from the mean, and that would make sense given the way the data is distributed. So if we're just looking for the arithmetic mean, it's not going to tell us too much because it's being pulled up by a bunch of data points on the far left here at the bottom end of the distribution. So for this one, excuse me, a more meaningful metric might be the median. What is the median? What is the person in the middle? And that's why when we talk about income distribution, that's usually what we talk about. What is the median household income? What is the income of the median worker? Because the mean will get pulled by either groups of really high income earners or really low income earners. Go down and check out the skewness here. We've got 2.4. That's a really big positive skew. And so that's one thing that right away, just visually, if we ran these stats without even doing a histogram, we could compare the skew and see this one was normal, this one was not, and know right away that we couldn't necessarily rely on the mean. So here's your descriptive statistics using Excel. Very easy with the data analysis tool pack. There are other ways you can use the formula bar for all of these as well, but this is the nice, quick, and dirty way to do it. Often, tendency is to report on the mean. Before you report on the mean, you want to do these 2 things. You want to look at the histogram to see how the data is distributed, and then you want to run these descriptive statistics just to see the difference between the mean, the median, and the mode. Then you can know how reliable the mean is, if it is truly an indicator of the average level in your data set.